We've all heard it before. You just need to be more confident. Confidence has become the go to advice for women in the workplace. Speak up more, take up space, believe in yourself. But here's a question no one is asking. What if confidence isn't actually the problem? Because the data tells a different story. Women are earning more degrees than men. They're outperforming in many roles. They're showing up, delivering results, and doing the work. And yet, women still only hold about 1 in 4 C-suite roles, and that number drops even further for women of color. And for every 100 men promoted to manager, only about 87 women are promoted. So if women are capable, qualified, and contributing, why aren't they advancing at the same rate? Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not just about confidence. It's about understanding power, because most of us were taught how to perform, but very few of us were taught how to navigate influence, visibility, and decision-making inside organizations. And that gap, that's what holds so many incredibly talented women back. But today's conversation is changing that. I'm joined by Kisha Wynter, a leadership consultant, executive coach, and power strategist with more than 20 years of experience in Fortune 50 organizations like GE and Citibank. She's coached leaders across more than 50 countries and is the creator of the Your Power Unleashed framework, helping leaders understand how to stop power leaks, expand their influence, and lead with clarity, conviction, and impact. Kisha is known for one powerful truth. Women don't need more confidence, they need their power back. And today we're going to break down exactly what that means and how you can start stepping into yours. Welcome to the new chapter of the Her Resources podcast. I'm your host, Linda Misegadis, and I'm so excited to be stepping into this next season with you solo. This podcast has always been about amplifying women's voices, exploring the challenges we face in HR, leadership, and life, and sharing the tools and inspiration we need to thrive. This is more than just a podcast, it's a community, a space for us to learn, lead, and lift each other up. Welcome to this new beginning. This is the Her Resources podcast. Let's get started. Welcome to the studio, Kisha.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you here. I wanted to kind of start out by just like reframing the whole conversation around the confidence myth. Why has confidence become the default advice for women? Because I hear that all the time too. It's like, oh, well, it's a confidence thing. She's just not confident enough. But then if you exert yourself in a way that you think you're exuding confidence, then you're like, oh, well, she's a bitch.
You just dive right in.
I'll just dive right in.
You're not warming up.
No warm-ups. Listen, you get right to the punch. It's just really interesting around that. So why do you think why that has kind of become that default?
First of all, it's the default advice because it's easy. It's individualistic. It doesn't require you to take a step back and look at the system in which the woman is operating and performing. And I would say, women and people of disenfranchised or different backgrounds from the people that are in the top leadership positions, and really not creating an environment where you're looking at, okay, this person doesn't fit the prototype of what we normally see a leader is, and really
Right?
understanding what are the differentiators. Like, we focus so much on differences, but
Yeah.
what we should be focusing on is the value that each person brings to the table, and that comes in the form not of in sameness, but in their differentiators. What's the unique perspective of value that they bring? And if they're spending all their energy trying to conform to a system that was not
Mhm.
designed for them,
Right.
then they're not going to be able to contribute at their highest level. And so when we see the system, and I say system, I mean organizations, individuals, decision makers, being uncomfortable with, a different style that they're not used to, we're not requiring
Right.
them to flex their leadership style. Instead, we
Yeah.
put the blame on the woman or the individual to say, oh, you need to be more confident. And to your point, women really experience what I call social friction or even backlash when they do step into their power. And what does that look like? There's a term I use now called power leaks, and it's really when it's not that you don't have power, it's you shrink and you dilute your own
Mm,
power because it is a learned survival adaptive mechanism.
yes.
Because it's a reaction to the backlash and the friction you experience when you actually step into and own your power. And so instead of asking, well, why is she shrinking? Because this same woman at home in her community, she has her
Right.
voice, she's walking, she has the swag.
Yeah.
When she's in a corporation, she's the last to speak in the room. She used hesitation language, maybe if she's always apologizing. And we don't ask
Mm.
ourselves why. And so instead of actually looking at the systemic issue, it's easier to just say, oh, be more confident.
I love that you said that, and what I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on, because I was just talking about this with my friend Stacy Lewis about this whole thing in operating in a system that wasn't designed for us. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Because I couldn't agree more that, when you think about women's entry into the workplace, the system didn't change, the workplace didn't change. They just said, "Okay, I guess women can be in the workplace." And so nothing changed around that. So talk a little bit about what you mean when you say we're operating in a system that wasn't designed for us.
Yeah, traditionally, when we look, as I said before, at the top of organizations, we have, it's a male dominated culture. We're in the US, and it's a non minority male dominated culture. And there are different values that people from different backgrounds bring to the table, and those values shape behaviors. So, for example, when I work, you talked about me working with 50, with leaders across 50 countries. For
Yes.
example, if you look at cultures such as in Eastern cultures, Asia,
Mhm.
Africa, they have more of a system where they defer to authority. And in that deference of authority, it doesn't mean they're not confident and they don't speak up. It's the way they have been socialized is that if a leader speak or a person that is more senior, older, you listen and you defer to that authority. You don't necessarily contest with them.
Good
Those
point.
individuals, right, s show up in meetings and they're not the loudest. The CEO says something and you're wondering why they're not arguing back. It's not because
Mhm.
they don't have something valuable to bring to the table. It's because they're
Right.
operating under a different value system. So it's
Yeah.
all about the value system. When we think about women, we talk about leadership styles in women, less competitive and more collaborative. And then, we think about what women are expected or socialized to do outside of the workplace. They have a lot of different responsibilities in the home. And so there is not that balance that organization give you to be able to balance those responsibilities. So it's all these things when you put them all together,
Yeah.
you don't fit the value system, you don't fit the lifestyle, you don't fit the work
Right.
style. And
Yeah.
because of that, you are disadvantaged because the decision makers tend to reward what they have traditionally seen from a leadership standpoint. Doesn't mean that it's not equally as effective. It simply
Right.
means you're being required to flex your own style to bend
Mhm.
the system, whereas leaders and decision makers out there are not being challenged to say, "Hey, like, let's think outside the box here. What
Yeah.
does this unique background bring to the table that's going to even open up additional business opportunities for us as a company?" And so it's
Right.
that's what it means. It's based on a completely different value system that rewards different behaviors that a lot of people, frankly, not just women, but women included, have
Yeah.
not been socialized into.
That's a really great point. I was at a conference a few years ago. It was the women's conference, actually. It was being held in Massachusetts at the time, and, one of the women in the audience, raised her hand, and she was talking about the fact she was from China originally. She immigrated to the US, and she was talking a little bit about what you were referring to there in that for her, in her culture, you work really hard, people recognize that hard work, and you get paid more money, and you move up in the, chain. In the US, That is not how it works. You can work really hard and they will just let you keep working really hard. No one's going to say, "Well, we should pay Keisha more money, because look at everything she's doing," or, "Hey, we should put Keisha in line for promotion." Unless you say something, nothing is gonna happen, and so that is a perfect example of what you were just talking about there.
Perfect
Yeah.
example. And I've had the benefit of working again in US companies, but they were global companies. And when we
Mhm.
it's a perfect that's a perfect example because when we see people
Yeah.
from, Asia, China included, or any of the countries in Africa,
Mhm.
they come here and, I was fortunate enough to be as part of a global leadership development program. And I remember one of the conversations we had on a regular basis is, well, this person is not displaying this sort of, Americanized value
Oh,
system, and so we
interesting.
don't think they have leadership potential. And we had to get to the place in the HR function, and I have a HR background. It was just like, well, we have to think about the fact that we're developing these people to go back to where they're coming from to be leaders. So if we turn them into the same style we see in the US, it's not going to work when they
Such a
go
great
back to
point.
their location. And frankly, even if individuals, let's say you're trying to reach a specific market, right? If you
Mhm.
speak the language, if you
Right.
don't interact with people in a culturally aware way, you're going to have less of a chance of getting access to that economic opportunity in that community. So even if you
Yeah.
say, well, all my employees are American or whatever, we live in a very, very diverse
Yeah.
country, and different
That's true.
styles and different cultures are still here. And so what I say to folks, and we did this experiment once, I say, what if we took those same US folks and sent rotational assignment in China? How would it work?
Yes.
And
Right.
surprisingly, when we did that, they would get the same feedback on, "Oh, like, this American is too abrasive and interruptive," and, what was the word
Right.
that they used besides abrasive? Like, insubordinate. And it really wasn't
Oh,
that they weren't strong performers. Again, it's a different cultural
yeah.
context.
Right.
And so, I think when as leaders, a lot of your listeners I know have HR backgrounds, but as
Right.
leaders, as HR professionals, we have to be able to take a step back and challenge the paradigm in which organizations are operating in,
Right.
for the purpose of creating a workplace that is inclusive for everyone, and not
Mhm.
just that, that the organization can remain relevant to the communities that they serve.
Right. That is such a great point. Can you talk about how you define power versus confidence? What's the difference? Because some people might think, well, confidence is power, but that's not necessarily true because you can fake confidence. I don't know if you can fake power.
Well, so when I talk about, first of all, I'll start with this idea of power literacy. All right.
Okay.
I say that in order to advance, your
Mhm.
performance only it keeps you employed.
Good point. Yeah.
But power literacy is what's going to determine whether or not you advance, whether or
Okay.
not you get relegated to just execution versus are you the one that is driving
Mhm.
outcomes and strategies across the
Okay.
organization, right?
Yeah.
And so that implies that the system is behind you. You have some
Yes.
systemic backing, right?
Right, right,
So you could
yes.
be confident.
Mhm.
And, I brought up power literacy because there are different, I call dimensions of it.
Okay,
And the first dimension is that internal dimension that I call own your power, which
okay.
if you want to equate that to confidence, then we can
Sure.
equate that to confidence. And
Yeah.
so there's a part of power that it has to start within personal power. Um, I always forget this quote by Alice, I think it was Alice Walker, where she says, the biggest way that people give up their power is believing that they have none.
Oh, that is a really powerful quote.
Yeah, it's believing
Yeah.
they don't have any. So the first
Oh,
thing that we have to do to, you know, operate in power literacy and power is activate our own personal agency. And that looks like, even though the system may backlash, it's not shrinking, it's not playing small, it's not using hesitant language, but it is really stepping into that power, expressing yourself, and showing up in a way that we would call as a confident way, in a confident way.
Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
So
That makes sense.
that's where there is an overlap. But power
Yeah,
doesn't stop with personal power because we work in systems, right?
right,
And
yes,
so the next phase of that power literacy that I talk about is that interpersonal dynamic, right? How are you able to express yourself, build relationships, build alliances across the organization? And this is where the reaction starts, because you show up confidently, but if someone doesn't reads that confidence as aggression,
right.
that's where you experience it. And
That is
so
true.
it's not enough to say, "Be confident." Cool. I'm gonna
Yeah,
be confident and show up. But how do I need to interact with others in the organization so that I can influence them and drive a specific outcome, right? It
I
does
like that.
require relationship building, right?
Mhm.
It
Yep,
does require investing, um, in relationships before you need something, before you actually have to drive an initiative.
right.
Um, but if you just show up as confident and there isn't this skill set that you have to build relationships in that
Mhm.
system, then you won't be influential. And part of power is influence. And the last piece I'll bring in is when we think about it now, not just from an interpersonal standpoint, but a systemic, a navigation, like navigating organizational dynamics. How does decision get made? Who gets to listen to? Who does the CEO default to and defer to? And so you could be confident, you could do all the work, but if people don't view you as, your voice as influential and they don't value your voice, you won't be powerful. You won't be able to drive initiatives across the organization. And so that's the difference, right?
Yeah,
The
that's a
confidence
really
can be
good
yeah,
point. Yeah.
sorry, the confidence can be internal, but if you're not rewarded for showing up that
Mhm.
way, then
Yeah.
you won't have any power.
Hey everyone, we're the Her Resources podcast, where women share real stories, real lessons, and the resources that help them succeed. We're always looking for inspiring women, business leaders, creatives, educators, and changemakers who want to share their journey and empower others. If that sounds like you, we'd love to hear your story. Reach out to us at contact@herresourcespodcast.com and let's start the conversation. I think that kind of also speaks to the fact that you don't have to have a title to be influential or powerful either, right? And that's, I think, the point that you're making here is that because I could have the title, I could be vice president, president, director, whatever, but if I have no power and no influence, my title really doesn't mean anything, right?
And have we not seen that so often
Oh,
in
so many times.
people
Yes.
have the biggest title and
Mhm.
effectively no one listened to them,
Yes, yes.
And
That is
so
so true.
and that's when we think about different we could get into a whole conversation now around what are the different types of power and how can you use the power to your advantage because everybody looks at title, positional, titular power and say,
Yes.
okay, like I don't have the biggest title in the organization. It means I'm not powerful, but your expertise, for example,
Right.
right,
Yes.
could be
Yep.
something that gives you credibility and power if that's something my operative word here is if it's something your function in your organization values, that
That's
could be
true.
one way. You could have
Yeah.
power because of your network, who is advocating, who is
Right.
sponsoring,
Good
who is
point.
supporting
Yes.
your work, the relationships, right?
Right.
So there's many different ways, and we just have to understand what are the different ways that we can access power. It's not just how loud we are or how charismatic we are. It's not just our title. There are many different aspects, and if we really take a step back, we can really find a way that we can be influential and step into that. But the thing
I
is,
really
I
like that.
always bring it back to the systems
Mhm.
because
Yes.
there is an interaction between what you're doing and how you're showing up and how the system responds and reacts. And that's why I say it's not just about confidence. We have to look at the entire
Yeah.
equation.
That's a really good point. Why do you think that this isn't taught in organizations? Is that, why do you think that's not taught in
You
organizations?
know, I think about this all the time. Growing up in corporate America, I spent
Mhm.
over 20 years and now I do another 6 years in consulting.
Yeah.
And okay, I can only speak for the US. I know we really have this idea of meritocracy, like
Yes,
corporations.
yes.
And so
Mhm.
we esteem this idea of just work hard, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps,
Yes, yes,
put the
yes.
work in, and you're going to succeed.
Yep.
And it's such a simplistic way of looking at things because we don't
Yes.
look at other factors
That
and
is so true.
nuance.
Yeah, yeah. That's the way I was raised. My parents, blue collar workers, very much so. And also, don't disrupt things, Linda. Don't go in, work hard, be respectful, do what needs to. All those things you just talked about, and it'll pay off in the long run. And guess what? It did not. It did not pay off at all. It wasn't until I shook that whole way of thinking up that it started to change the trajectory of my own career. But you're absolutely right. That is 100% how I was raised and how I was taught to believe that you were supposed to approach work.
And most of us are taught that, right?
Yes,
That's why most of
absolutely.
us are not the 1% at top of organization
That's right, that's right.
because the people that are, believe
Yeah,
you me, they have a completely different mindset and a
yeah,
completely different way of approaching things. And,
that is so
when I
true.
say this, people start to think, "Oh, well, Keisha, you don't value hard work." Just like you, I was brought up, and if you add that to the fact that I'm from a family of immigrants, like you, this is what you learn, right?
Right, yes,
You work twice as
absolutely.
hard, and so
Yes,
that you can advance. And so it's
right,
not a matter of hard work is not important. The point is
right.
hard work and performance get you in the door, and it may
Yeah,
keep you employed. Because if you're
yeah.
not performing, you'll be pipped out. So,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
so but it's not the only thing.
That's a great point. It's not the only thing, and I think that's a really important point that you're bringing in all of this. I'm curious, like, I remember when I was doing my certification in public management, we talked a lot about the formal and informal network, and you talk about that as well as to that power kind of actually flows through this both informal and formal network, really. Talk a little bit about that for people who maybe aren't familiar with it.
Yeah. I talk a lot about when we look at organization charts, right? Which is more structured like a ladder.
Yes.
We say, okay, like if I want to get this project or initiative signed off on,
Mhm.
I need to have the CEO. I need to influence the CEO, right? The CEO is
Yeah.
the top dog, as they say in
Right,
an
right.
organization. That's who I have to influence.
Yeah.
But we don't realize that there is the org chart and the invisible org chart or the power chart, I'll call it. And it's not as simple as who's at the top. While the org chart shows position and timeline, it's more like a ladder. The invisible org chart or the power chart is really more like it's dynamic and it's more like a web.
Yes,
So
yes.
so instead of thinking, you may go to a meeting and say, okay, I'm going to present this to the CEO and I'm going to like really impress her
Uh-huh.
or him, whatever their gender is. So let me try to impress this person. And you don't realize that before the meeting at the corner of the eye, the CFO, the finance manager, could have been the one that says, you know what, Keisha's coming in and she's going to propose this. Like, I don't agree. So who was the
Yeah.
influencer? It wasn't the CEO. The CEO
No.
might be the one that's making the final approval,
Right.
but it was somebody else. And it could even be the executive assistant, right?
Yes, yes. No, I'm so glad you brought that up because you think about back in the day when secretaries and executives assistants were more prevalent in brick and mortar organizations. They often held the power and the influence, and were far more influential than anybody actually even realized they were, and how powerful their voice was with that leader that they were supporting. So it's such a great point.
And you don't know. So if you're operating just by this visible or chart of
Mhm.
visible influence lines, by the
Yeah,
time you start presenting something in a meeting, you may hit, a roadblock, and you may not
so true.
really realize why you're hitting
Yes,
a roadblock.
yeah, that's a good point. Yes, absolutely. Because how many times have we done that? You're right. We go in, we think we're at the right level, we've done all of our homework, or we thought we did all of our homework, and what we didn't really realize is there, to your point, there's this whole informal network of people that are influencing what's really going on, and so figuring out who those people are and identifying them early on in your process, it's kind of that whole, in sales, that bottom down, top, or bottom up, top down approach, because if the people down here aren't supporting it, then the people up here aren't gonna meet you in the middle, because typically if it just comes from the top down, the bottom up is like, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't, so
And the thing is, and that's what requires you studying your organization, studying the teams that you work on, because it's
yeah,
not going to be straightforward for each and every person to figure out, because each system, each organization has a different culture. They have different norms. Each leader has a different norm than, so you work in the same organization, you go from one leader to another, and what they valued is completely different from what the new leaders value. And so I say you have to really learn to read the organization that you're in, understand what words that you need to use. Is there a language that you need to use that will
good point, yeah,
give you the power to
mhm,
allow things to be approved? Because if you use, like, I'm a executive coach, leadership development consultant, and I use the word psychological safety and all that. This is just like a second word we
right,
use in HR, right?
yep, absolutely,
And I was going to this is even me dealing with power systems in an organization. I was going to present this idea to the CEO of a company that wanted us
uh-huh,
to come in and do leadership development training. And their CHRO said to me, "Look, do not use psychological safety." I'm like, "What? They don't want a psychological work environment." I said, "Trust me, just like it could mean the same thing, just don't use that word. Because if you use that
yeah,
word, they're gonna shut down, they're gonna be triggered, and then that's it." And so how many times do we use language, right? So it's very
so true,
nuanced. It's language.
yeah,
What do you use? What's the norms of getting things
mhm,
across the board? Who
right,
has to buy in? This is the informal thing, that who do you have to
yeah,
influence before you get to the meeting, right? Because we think the
right,
decision is made in the meeting, but the decision often is made before you get to the meeting. So are you
that
ready
is
to
a really good
pre-meeting
point.
before the
Yes, that's true, that is so true,
and
yeah,
all of this is our dynamics and aspects of power. So we go back
yeah,
to, like, "Oh, just be more confident." I'm like, "Yeah, be more confident, but I'm not doing all the things we just spoke about for the last 30 minutes already." Like, you're
yes,
not going to be able to influence, because at the end of the day, that's really what power is, influencing and driving outcomes without having to brute force execute it yourself. And so this is the other thing I add for women. This is the other thing I'll add for women that I see so many times at all levels. But it really causes women to get stuck, um, when they hit a certain point in their careers, because,
mhm,
again, we've been socialized, work hard, perform,
yeah,
prove ourselves, stand out. And
yep,
so there's this idea of ambition and highly accountable and driving execution for results. But
yeah,
then you get to the senior leadership team. Now you
mhm,
have other dynamics. You're not just leading the team directly. Now you are a leader of leaders, right? You have
very true,
levels
yeah,
that are below you. You
yeah,
have matrix organizations that you have to influence across the enterprise to get work done. So what I see a lot of leaders do is use the old framework of doubling down on their execution and trying to drive through getting things done either themselves or
Okay.
pushing their team to get work done
Yeah.
versus instead of focusing on driving execution, you're focusing on driving alignment, which is
Yeah.
influence. You're trying to
Yeah.
align because sometimes, I had an IT guy that he kept on getting stuck because he had competing priorities with
Yeah.
HR, competing priorities with the finance team. So it wasn't
Okay.
about working twice as hard and
Right.
being accountable, it was how do you bring people along so it causes
Yeah.
less friction and you don't have to work twice as hard because now people are
Yeah.
aligned, they agree with you, and they're ready to support you.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference.
That's such a great point. Well, and it's funny because some of these ideas that you're talking about here too also kind of fit into the whole concept for our HR folks out there is like organizational change management. And so it's that influence there as well. I know in the past when I've driven large projects, one of the things that I do is go and meet with all of the various key
Stakeholders.
stakeholders, develop relationships, understand what matters to them because then when we're putting the program together, I'm now taking all of that into consideration. It's also a little hard for you to push back on me when I'm just preparing or presenting exactly what you told me, and what you shared with me were those pain points or the things you wish would happen, and now I'm presenting it back to you. It's harder for them to be resistant to something that they've presented to you, and so it actually helps in what you're just talking about there is really driving that influence, and moving in the direction that you need to go, so
Absolutely. People are much more, I say this all the time, and I use this as a coach. People are much more brought in or bought into the process
yes.
when they feel like they were part of the ones that created it. Now they're invested because they're like,
Yes.
"Oh, my
Yes.
name is on this. I have input in this. I want this to
Yep.
succeed." But if you try to do it isolation by
Mhm.
yourself,
Yep.
then that's when you get the resistance and people are like,
I
"Well,
agree.
you may even come up with the same thing that,
Yeah, exactly. It might be exactly the same, you're right, but different outcomes,
but
right?
different
All just
outcomes."
based on that. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
that is so true. Why do you think that so many high-performing women feel stuck or that they feel like they're just being overlooked all the time? They think they're doing all the right things. They maybe are, I'm performing at this level. I'm thinking I'm developing the relationships, but gosh, I just feel like every time I'm just stuck or nobody seems to pay attention. I'm always getting overlooked when these new positions or promotions or changes are happening in the organization. Why aren't they looking at me? Why do you think that happens?
It's a part of what we've been talking about, over-indexing on delivering results and
Okay.
working hard delivering results, and I think especially when we say deliver results, people are like, "Yeah, but I went above and beyond in this project. I delivered on time. I was within or under budget." All the things. But to your point, what you just said was big part of it, like, they haven't done the other aspects of it. Um, and sometimes not sometimes, it usually is more difficult for women to develop strong relationships. It takes more intentional effort across the senior leadership team and the organization,
That's very true.
because a lot of the leaders, as we talked about before, are men. And so
Yes.
finding that common ground and
Yeah.
building those relationships across, the organization, not just putting your head down and working,
Right.
taking your head back up, building the relationships across the organization, also ensuring that where do you have a plan and a strategy? Because again, just working hard can't is not a full strategy, right? If you want to go to the C-suite, right, you have to
Yeah.
be able to assess within this organization, what are the things that they value in the C-suite
Okay.
that's going to make you promotable,
Oh,
And
yeah.
so far, you've been only working on delivering results and working hard, but maybe they want somebody who has the ability to strategically influence across the organization. They want somebody who can communicate in a way that's inspiring, whatever that long list is,
Mhm.
but figuring out what it is that organization rewards and
Yeah.
making sure that you have developed a brand or an image in that organization that's aligned with what they want.
That is such a great point. I remember, I mean, this was 100 years ago, in early my career, and and the times were a little different. I mean, women have come a long way, but not far enough for sure. But I remember going to my boss and saying, "Gosh, I just don't feel like I'm moving in a direction. Is there something else I could be doing?" And his advice to me was that maybe I should bring my other boss, that maybe I should bring him coffee in the morning, maybe I should do these sorts of things, and so it just kind of proves what you're talking about is the system and what it was designed for, and the fact that I mean, in that case, and of course, I didn't do any of the things that he recommended because that would have totally taken my power away if I would have just conceded to this idea that I should be subservient, and that's how I was going to move along in the organization. I'm like, "No,
Like
that
the
is not gonna
opposite
do anything."
behavior of
Yeah,
what you
the
would take.
opposite, exactly, yes. So
Meanwhile, they call it, there's actually, office mom, I think is the term that they use.
yes,
You're being the
yes.
office mom instead of being the one that's thought of to drive strategic projects.
So true,
Are
yes,
you
yeah.
a
You want the
strategist?
nurturer, the one who takes care of everything, the one who makes sure lunch is ordered, all of that sort of stuff. You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
and in those cases, you might be an endeared person and, people like you, but is it moving your career in any way? It really isn't,
No,
right?
because
Yeah.
they don't see you as someone that can actually influence and drive the outcomes
Yeah.
organization, maybe not even someone who is a strategic thinker, because you're just seen as the nice person.
Yes, yes, that is so true. You talked early on about like some of the common ways that you see women unintentionally giving their power away. Like you talked about power leaks. Expand on that a little bit more so that women can maybe maybe it's about a personal awareness too, because I think sometimes we probably don't even realize we're doing this. So talk about how can we identify what our power leaks are?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, so some of the common ones, right? It's well, first of all, we go back to, again, I always wanna frame it in, I am totally empathetic, I have been there, I totally understand why this happens, because you have definitely, at some point in your life, received negative repercussions from standing in your power, right? I mean, most people, even if it hasn't happened in the workplace, it happens, like however social,
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we're
right?
talking about work, but we've seen it happen outside of work. Absolutely, yes,
And
yeah.
side note, I had a client, a client that I was coaching, and I just remember she was like one of the smartest persons in finance.
Uh-huh.
And, the executives, they sent her. I mean, they were actually supportive of her. The system was behind her.
Yeah,
And I said to her, I was like, girl, like, everybody wants you to win. Like, why
yeah,
is it that you keep shrinking? You use this language that takes away from your maybe, right? That's one of the words, like one of
yeah,
the things,
oh, okay, maybe,
maybe,
yeah,
but if, and it's totally taking away from your credibility, your authority, and the perception of you.
right.
And she said, and I'm not a therapist, but, like, it
Uh-huh,
all came back to her. She's like, "Yeah, like, from how I was raised in my culture, um, children were to be seen and not heard, and
right.
specifically as a woman, I was taught not to ruffle feathers, and I was very, like, boisterous, and I would get teased and saying that I'm too bossy. Like,
Yeah.
the other boys would tease her, say she's too bossy, nobody likes her.
Oh.
And then she internalized that and said, "Okay, I can't be too so again, she was confident,
Yeah, yes,
but
yeah, but
circumstances
shrinking away
caused
from
her
her
to
power.
shrink.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that is what, those adaptive mechanisms, because we're uncomfortable, what do? especially in uncomfortable situations where we may have to have a difficult conversation, right? People that are powerful may have to have difficult conversations. How do we show up? Do we use shrinking, hedging language, like I just said? Maybe if I don't want to bother you, but all that hesitation language that causes you, that's one. Playing small. So instead of, right, not taking credit for the work that you have done,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah,
So that people
uh-huh.
can know the contribution that you bring to the table. Over
Right.
accommodating, for example, it's just like,
Okay.
"Can
Yeah,
you, well, what if," and you say, "Okay," then you agree with everything rather than say,
right.
"Actually, this is my recommendation."
Okay,
So
okay,
it's
yeah.
really there are so many, and then on the flip side of this, right, because that's the shrinking and the playing small and the accommodating piece,
Right.
but then there's the overcompensating piece
Okay.
where people move from, and stereotypically, we say, like, the women shrink and the men are the ones that overemphasize different things, so they really overfunction and they take all the credit, and that also comes from insecurity, right? So, we're used to saying we're shrinking, it's like, "Oh, yeah, but what about you're the one that's always talking, and you suck the life out of the room, and nobody else gets to talk a chance to speak." And so it actually shows up in different ways. You just have to understand how it shows up to you and recognize whether or not it limits your impact to be influential.
Yeah. Oh, I like that, and I love that example that you gave there too, because again, kind of coming up in a different time when I watched this, the few women that I did see make it to the top or that were getting promoted, what I would often see then, and to your point, it came from a place of insecurity, is this shift where now they had to be one of the guys, right? So now they were not reaching back to give other women a hand up. It was more of a, "Look, I fought like hell to get here, so you just back off and stay out of my way." And then they change their demeanor, how they approach. Maybe all of a sudden, they're coming across in a very aggressive, assertive way, which is, is not even who they are.
Mm.
And so you're absolutely right. That is such a great example because you still see that. I think women are much, much better than they were back then because, and I get it. We were fighting for a place, we were trying to find a place in all of that. Not a good excuse, but I get it. And so today it's better, but we're still not quite where we need to be. And what you do see is maybe some of that old school kind of approach to coming in where you don't see, like, I'm just such a big believer of reaching back and helping the
Reaching
next
back.
person up,
Yep.
even if it means I put you on my shoulders and you go above me, because it's like, if that opportunity is there and you can take it, why wouldn't I help you?
Right.
But that I think is a good, what you're talking about there is like, that's not giving my power away, that's actually embracing my power and helping to maybe share that with
Share
someone
that
else,
power.
right? Yeah.
And I talked about, like, the 3 layers before, if you remember, was owning your power, and there was
Yeah.
a interpersonal relationship,
Right?
and then the
Yeah.
organizational. But you just alluded to the highest level, which is multiplying collective power, right? I think
Okay.
that's the
Yeah.
ultimate goal. It's when you are actually now able to use your power for good,
Okay.
to bring
Yeah.
others up, to pull people along, to give them opportunity.
Right.
Uh, and
Yes.
so and that's the ultimate outcome in my book
Okay.
for being a
Yeah.
powerful person is that you want to have working in business is
Mhm.
really a big opportunity if we use it in the right way to make a
I
positive
agree.
impact in the life of others and in our society.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
a lot of times people will think power is a bad thing, but power is not a bad thing. It's how you use it
Yes.
determines what it is.
That is so true. Yes, yes. Because we see lots of powerful, smart people, some who use it for good and some who use it for evil. But it's all still power, right? It's just to exactly what you said. It's just how you're actually using it. I really like that. There's this misconception that power can equal politics or manipulation as well. And so sometimes we'll see a powerful person and we automatically assume that maybe that's a leverage for politics and manipulation. But that's not really true, is it?
Again, it goes back to exactly what I just said. It's like, how are you using it? Are you using it? Because the
Yeah.
reality is, in order to get work done, you have to be able to influence. which
You
is
do. That is so true. Yeah, nothing ever gets
nothing.
done. You're
You have to
absolutely
influence yourself, because if you
yeah,
feel like you don't wanna get up and do something, like, you gotta figure out how
so
to influence you
true.
have to influence the
Yes.
people on your team to do
Yes,
their job.
yes,
Then we talk about
absolutely.
all the other stuff we talked about before, right? So, to naive like, power is happening whether or not we like it.
That's
It's
true.
just
That
in
is
the
true.
air we breathe, and
Yeah.
so to assume that it is political or toxic, uh
Mhm.
now I don't blame people because we've seen it abused and used
So
in so
much,
many
yes, so
different
much
ways,
abuse. Yes, absolutely.
but the decision isn't whether or not I'm gonna engage in it or I'm gonna be political and toxic. I mean, there is a
Yeah,
third option.
that's a good point. Yes, that's a really good point. Yes,
It's
absolutely.
and you know what I say? I did an article on this for Forbes. I talked about values as
Mhm.
connecting to your values and using that as your anchor for engaging in
Yes.
power. Right? If I
Yeah.
decide I wanna be a powerful person, like you talked about
Mhm.
putting somebody on your shoulder and creating an opportunity for them, it tells me that one of your values is contribution, right?
Right,
You
yeah,
wanna contribute to the lives of others, and so
yeah.
if your power is based in contribution,
Yep,
then it won't corrupt, it won't be
that's
toxic,
true.
right?
That's a good
If
point,
you have
yeah.
an abundant mindset when it comes like, it's not, zero-sum game. Your power is not I have all
Right,
the power and you have none, then the
right.
power won't be toxic. It's really about or if it's like, I wanna be powerful and I wanna advance, but I'm not gonna violate my integrity to do so, right? Ye
Yes, yeah, that is such a good point.
and
Yes,
so
absolutely.
coming back to that's the difference. It's what are you
Mhm.
grounding? What's your why? Simon Sinek says it, right? Like, what's your
Yes, what's your
why?
why? That is so true. Yes. I have exciting news. The Her Resources podcast is opening sponsorships. If your brand supports women in HR and leadership, think talent, well being, learning, pay equity, coaching, productivity, or mission driven tech. This is your moment. Our listeners are decision makers and change makers who show up for real conversations and practical tools every week. We offer flexible options, pre roll or mid roll host reads, series sponsorships, and thought leadership integrations that highlight your story without the fluff. Ready to connect with a highly engaged audience and grow with us? Email contact@herresourcespodcast.com and put sponsorship in the subject line. I can't wait to collaborate. Then getting grounded in your values and what's driving you. No, I think that's a really valid point. And that's where you can have the balance of power and integrity, right? I always think about that with politics. I'd always say, if you could have someone who is a really good person that goes into politics, one of two things happen is one, they either maintain that level of integrity and are a good person, they're probably less successful, but that's what they or you give into the system because at that point you are willing to give up your power in exchange for your integrity and what you really core believe in because you think that that's the only way you're actually going to get anything done. So,
Exactly. And
yeah.
so, I think at the end of the day, as leaders in organizations, we have to really just take a step back and think broadly about
Yeah.
the impacts of what we're doing
Mhm.
and how we're showing up and, how we're navigating these systems. These
Right.
systems, are we doing it in a
Yes.
way that brings value, or are we and it's generative, or are we doing it in a
Yes.
way that's destructive?
That is so true. That's a really good point. Talk about like the likability, because I think women get caught up on that too. Like if all of a sudden I come into my power and I feel like, people aren't going to like me. And so now I get caught up in trying to find the balance between being powerful and being liked. I mean, you can have both, I think, in the same, but I think a lot of times women are afraid that they're not going to be liked anymore when they
Yeah.
move up. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the lot of the studies, do show that women are being held more to being liked, than anything else, and it's really a tightrope that women have to figure out how to walk through, um, and I don't love it
Yep.
because, I mean, because the reality is you do have to be respected.
You do. Yeah.
And you have to be seen as someone that can drive the organizational objectives forward.
Right.
And that requires sometimes taking a stand, holding boundary, not backing down for the good
Right.
of something.
Right.
And it
Yes.
may
Yeah.
require you not to be, it doesn't mean you have to be aggressive
Right. Yeah.
or rude,
Mhm.
but it may mean you may do things that others may not like or agree. But that's what leaders do, right?
Right,
It's
exactly,
like
they
being
have to make the
parents,
hard
right?
decisions. It is, that's absolutely true, yeah, if we were worried about being liked all the time, we probably would
You're
fail at
not
being
gonna be
parents for sure.
as
Yeah,
effective.
yeah,
But it is a tightrope that women unfortunately have to figure out how to navigate
yeah,
because society does not, I'll talk about individuals and organizations that are the exception, but if we think about generalization across across organizations or even in our society, if you don't balance that likability with being respected, it generally becomes harder. So for me, I'm all about the 2 things I say about that. It's
mhm,
one, ensuring that you're working in a place and in an organization that is going to respect and value what you bring to the table.
okay,
Because
yes, yeah,
one organization and I've done this with clients. There have been one organization that really, they receive a lot of backlash because of their quote unquote style. I'm not saying people don't have
mhm,
to work, have developmental needs. I mean, if
oh,
they didn't,
sure,
they wouldn't have
yeah,
a job, right? I'm literally
yeah,
working with
right, yes,
people
yeah,
that are working
exactly,
on their areas of development. So I don't want to say that you don't have to figure out how to balance your style or to flex your style is a better word.
yeah,
But there are times, because of how systems are, organizations will unfortunately and unjustly penalize you because you're not behaving
yeah,
in a certain way. Whereas
that's
that
true,
same behavior that is considered rude or obstructive or insubordinate in another organization, another setting, it's seen as actual true leadership skills. I
that
think
is such a great point,
and so at
yeah,
some point, while we have to figure out, I'm very practical, we have to figure out how to navigate it.
yeah,
Um, and it's a balance that we have to, think about. I think there's a book called Likeable Badass
oh,
where where the author literally talks about this specific topic. And I say, yeah, flex your style, but also don't give up your power. And if it means you have to be in a place that's going to reward you for what you bring rather than cause you to like shrink and play small, then find a
mhm,
place that will, because not every organization operates that way. Find
that
a
is
place
so
where your
true.
strengths is gonna be rewarded. I say, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. Yeah. Well, and it's so true. And I think sometimes we forget in all of this is that we do have choices
Yes.
and that we can make different choices, right? We don't have to stay where we're at and tolerate this. And then maybe too, it's so important for, and maybe even more so for women, is to really build a community outside of work, right? And have other people that you can talk to so that, because I see it oftentimes with women in leadership that exactly to your point, as soon as they have to make the hard decisions or do these things that nobody likes, boy, the outburst and the just the backlash that women get compared to men. Not that if a male leader was doing that they'd be loving everything, but man, and they attack the woman on such a personal level. I mean, I've heard like, commenting on her looks or her style or nothing to do with her leadership or her
Listen,
decision making or anything. It's absurd.
I've been in meetings, promotion meetings, and they've been talking about her platform heels, and I'm like, excuse me. Because this is why I couldn't stay in corporate forever. So I
Yeah.
was like, excuse me, I'm not quite sure what this has to do with her performance.
Right.
Why are we
Yes,
talking about her makeup
exactly.
and her
Why are
lipstick?
we talking about this? Yeah.
Like, let's not do that because I could talk about your very tight shirt that,
You're right.
your
Yes,
non-iron shirt.
exactly.
Like, let's not
Right.
deviate from the topic. And, that is part of the challenge. It's like,
It is.
there's a
Yeah.
different standard. And so how
There
do
is a
you,
completely
right?
different
I
yeah.
say, you know, I'm a realist, right?
Mhm.
We
Yep.
operate in a world where everything isn't the way you want them to be.
No,
And
that is true.
so, but the advice that we give to women and to leaders in general, a lot of times in these unpredictable, um, imperfect systems, we give incomplete advice. And incomplete advice in an imperfect system does not scale,
No, that is
right?
so true.
And
Yes,
and so
yes.
let's be more holistic in the advice. This is why I am vehemently against, just confidence. I'm like, it takes more than that. Like maybe part
Right.
of it or
Yes.
just hard work. It takes more than that. So what
Yeah.
else do we have to do? Right?
That's such a
Having a
great
seat at the
point.
table for oh, just get a seat at the table. Okay, like first of all, it's not easy to just get a seat at the table. But
No, it is not.
even if I get a seat at the table, it doesn't
Doesn't mean I have a
be
voice.
heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's right. It is so true. We think that that's gonna be the thing, is once we get that seat at the table, but you're right. You can get the invitation, you may even get the chair, at the table, but doesn't mean anybody's listening to you or that you're having any influence in the decisions that are
Yeah,
being
you could
made.
just be the token in the room, like, "Okay, now
You
we have a woman
absolutely
in the room.
could. Yes,
Cool." Like,
absolutely.
but now
Yes.
we're not gonna listen to her. We just have her
Nope.
as sitting and observing, and she
Yeah.
actually doesn't influence decisions or drive outcomes, and
No.
so that's not a room I wanna be in.
No, me neither. Exactly. Oh, I love that you said that because I think that's such an important thing. What are a few things that someone could start doing immediately to reclaim their power? Like, what are some actionable takeaways we could give to our listeners today?
Really good advice. I'm gonna go back to my structure. Imma give
Yeah.
you 1 from each.
Okay.
First of all, it's identifying how you show up in terms of power. Are you owning
Okay.
it or are you abdicating it? Right?
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay.
right? So it could show up in the things that we talked about before. Am I shrinking? Am I taking a step back from having difficult conversation? Am I using language that take away from my authority? So identify the one thing that you're doing that actually diminishes your authority and your power and work on improving that so that you can show up powerfully. The second thing is around learning how to influence. It's building relationships before you need them, before you actually um, get an initiative. You talked about like, I need to talk to everyone and got their input.
Yeah.
Like, start doing that. Build relationships, invest in relationships before you have an ask.
That is a really good one because you are so right. It's that network of people that you have, and you're right. And then you don't need them now, but you never know when you might need them or when they might need you for that matter. But that's a really good one. So I hope everybody takes that one.
Yeah. And then the last one I'll give, it's now that you've built a relationship and you've showed up powerfully, understand how to position things in a way that will cause other people to want to buy into what you're saying. That is going to create a win-win
Okay.
for them, right? The
Yeah.
example I gave earlier, don't use
Yep.
psychological don't use psychological
Yeah. Don't use that word.
use another word. And actually the word
Yeah.
that they preferred was not a bad word. It was like inclusive. They loved the
Yeah.
word being more
Yeah.
inclusive. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
let's go with inclusive.
We'll
That's a
do
good
that
word.
one. Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
and so just knowing how to frame and position things in a way that is going to be bought into and that you can
Yeah.
be able to influence others. So those are some of the 3 really
I like
tactical
those.
things that you do that can help you own
Yeah.
your power and be more influential within an organization.
Those are really good ones, and I've got an example of where when I had to learn how to use my words in a better way, and understanding my audience, and I went into a room and I made a very bold statement like, "Well, if you're not doing this, you shouldn't even be here," kind of thing, I mean, at that and in that moment, all my power went away, right? All my influence went away because I sucked it right out of the room, and so that was one of those where I'm like, "Okay, not how you should approach this situation in the future. Here's a better way to go in and use that." So, we live and we learn, different ways that we need to approach a situation, and that was a very good learning experience for me to know, "Boy, now they're not hearing a word you said
Nothing.
because you."
And, for
Yeah.
those of us who are self-aware and socially aware, like it sounds like you are, we can tell the time in the conversation where like, yeah, nothing I say from
Yep.
this moment forward
Nope.
is going to. And
Nope.
unfortunately, I wish the only way you could, I mean, again, it goes back to one of my points, is before you get to the point of having, if you can, because there's not always the case that you can do that,
Right,
it's
exactly.
doing the pre-meeting, the pre-work to understand, to get to know um, what the points are that will convince them and the points that will deter.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a chance to do that, then there's nothing but experimenting and trying, and then sometimes it means it will work,
That
sometimes it won't.
that's right. That's right. I had to rebound from that, but yeah.
It's so funny 'cause even my ex that happened to me, like, a couple months ago. I didn't have the opportunity to I was talking to a partner of a company,
Uh-huh.
and, just talking about my programs. And the HR people, I was talking to HR people, I was like, "Yeah, some things work." Because I look at the top of the organization,
Yep.
there's not a lot of, not a lot of women at the top of the
Yeah.
organization. Well, this female partner apparently was really mad. I could tell she was pissed that I said
Oh,
it.
right, right, yes, yeah.
Who knew?
Right, yeah, who would think saying something like that would actually elicit that response? Absolutely, yes.
The conversation was, was like, "Oh, this would be so good because it will help you bring more women to the senior leadership positions," which look at the org chart, and there are not a lot. And I've said this a
Right.
lot to many
Of course.
organizations, and they've hired
Yes.
me, and they're like, "Yeah, this is what we wanna work on." But
Right.
no, not
Not
this
there.
partner. She was not.
Wow.
She was like, "Well, there's something we work really hard on." I was like, "Oh boy,
Yeah.
this
You
was a
hit a
trigger
nerve.
for her."
Yes,
Right, and so
absolutely.
sometimes,
Yeah.
you live and you learn and you
That's
have
so
to
true.
adjust, but that's why I highly recommend. This is why one succeeded and one didn't,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
CHRO gave me the top. Because who knew psychological safety could be a trigger for somebody?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you would think, "Well, gosh, doesn't everybody wanna be psychologically safe?" Yeah,
Apparently
no,
not. We
exactly,
don't
no.
just be inclusive, which is good too, but and
Absolutely.
so it's there is n the you just have to do your homework. It takes work.
That is a
And
good
that
point.
goes back to the
Yes.
first questions you had for me was, well, why isn't it happening and why isn't confidence enough? Because it's lazy. It's
Yeah.
lazy.
Yes.
Lazy
Yeah, yeah,
advice.
yeah. That is that is a really good point, and I think that's been the theme of so much is that just reminding that you can read the book, you can listen to the podcast, you can, do all of these things, but if you're not willing to put in the work and really, be create that self-awareness, spend some time evaluating where you sit in your power, in your influence, and understanding your network and maybe even doing a little bit of an inventory of those things. But it all takes work, right? You didn't get where you are today because you just rode some wave to get where you are. You had to work really hard and figure out where do I want to be and how am I going to take this and what is my approach going to be. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah.
nuance. It's studying the context of the place that you work in and moving forward. And so the last example I give you is a really good one for people who still work in, because I realize a lot of my examples are as a consultant. But when I worked, in the old firm I worked in, I presented this idea of people were kept on telling me, annoyed me from when I worked in corporate. I was like, if another manager comes to me as an HR person and tells me that this woman isn't promotable because, yes, she has deep domain expertise, but she's not confident enough and we need her to have executive presence. If
Oh,
I hear
yeah.
that one more time, I'm literally going to
Mhm.
jump out the window. And so I decided it's like, okay, I have these coaching skills and I have these organizational effectiveness skills. How do I merge them both? And yes, address the women owning the power, but also talk about the systemic things that are stopping them from advancing.
Yes,
And so I
yeah.
designed a whole program called Own Your Power, which converted to Your Power Unleashed, which is the name of my
Okay.
book.
Yes, yes.
And I presented it within my company, and the first person I spoke to, like, if my boss ever listens to this, still love you, but when I talked to him, my old boss, when I talked to him, it was like he didn't identify with what I was saying, and he was like really
Right.
nice, but he was just like, "Oh, okay," eyes glazed over, and I knew it was gonna go
Yeah.
nowhere. Like I was like nowhere.
Right.
So I was frustrated. I was just like, okay, like I
Sure.
presented this initiative. It's really needed in the organization, but
Yeah.
it's not landing with the HR leader. Like, what is happening?
Right.
And so I went home. I could have been defeated. I was frustrated and annoyed,
Sure.
but I said to myself, okay, clearly my strategy isn't working. Like, it would have been
Right.
easy for me to be like, well, it's a male dominated industry and
Yes,
like
yes,
they're
exactly. Just
misogynistic
chalk it
and
up. Yep.
yeah, maybe, but like that's still not going to help me. So,
No. Mm-mm.
how do I move this initiative forward? So I thought to myself, I
Yeah.
said, okay, I know a female executive that I've heard her talk through about how she experienced, the lack of confidence and, all the things I talk about now, which is power leaks. Let me talk to her. And immediately when I told her, she was aligned. She was like, yes, this is so needed. I think this is going to work. But the first advice she gave me was, which is why I said, know how to position things. She said to me, do not label this as another training or develop. Like nobody wants to hear. Like we're a training
Yeah,
and
no, that
development
is such
company.
a great
If you
point.
say
Yes.
training and development,
Mhm.
they're
Yes,
gonna be like
people are, "Doop,
HR,
I'm out."
whatever.
Yes, yeah,
But
such a
if
good
you
point.
tie it to the actual leadership pipeline and the business outcomes, and the fact that we're going to be able to capture more people in different, markets because
Mhm.
of the work that we're doing, then
Right.
present the business case. Here are some
Yes.
talking points that you could use.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I didn't end up getting to be brought into the room with my boss, but this other C-suite executive was just like, okay, now you come. And I'm presenting it to the CEO of the organization. And he was like, yeah. And like, this sounds like a business. It was funny he said this to me. He was totally, I approve this. You could speak at conference. You could roll out this program. But like, I think you should do a TED Talk. I think you should start a business.
That is amazing.
It was
What
so
a great.
funny. He was just like, "This is an
Yes,
actual good business plan." And I was just like, "Well, I wasn't pitching it as well, but thanks for the endorsement." But see the difference between me,
totally, yes.
understanding my context and how do I
Yes.
position things to be able to influence an outcome, it
Yeah,
made a big difference. And so that's something that,
I love
we
that.
can do that will help us to
Yeah.
be more effective.
That is fantastic. What a great story, Keisha. I think if there's one thing that I hope our listeners take away from our conversation today, it's this. You are not behind because you lack confidence. We've talked about that. You are behind because no one ever taught you how power actually works. And I think Keisha gave us the framing today. So at the moment that you understand, you will start to move differently. You're going to start to speak differently and you're going to start to lead differently. And that changes everything. So, just a few takeaways for our listeners to sit with. Performance alone is not enough. Visibility and influence matter. You may be giving your power away in subtle, everyday ways that you don't even realize that you're doing, those power leaks. Power is not about changing who you are, it's about owning it fully. And most importantly, your power is not gone. It's available to you right now. You just have to take it. If this conversation resonated with you, I highly encourage you to connect with Kisha Wynter. She's got amazing stuff all over LinkedIn. But Kisha, how can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn. So by my name, Kisha Wynter with a Y, Wynter. Also on my website, Your Power Unleashed, which is also the name of my book, which is available on Amazon,
Yes.
by the time this airs, my audiobook will be out as well.
Awesome. That is amazing. Well, and we'll make sure to we'll put all those links in the show notes for everybody so that you can easily get to Kisha and get her book as well, Your Power Unleashed. And if you're listening and thinking, wow, I really needed this, well, don't keep it to yourself. Make sure that you share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or a woman in your life who needs this reminder, and make sure you follow the show, leave a review, and stay connected with us here on the Her Resources podcast, because this is not just a podcast, it's a community of women who are done playing small and ready to lead with clarity, confidence, and power. Thank you to all of our listeners, and especially to our guest, Kisha, for being on the podcast today. It was so wonderful getting to meet you and spend some time with you today.
Thank you, Linda.
Yes, we'll see everybody next time.